Alice's parents were killed in a plane crash when she was just 7 years old, leaving her an orphan. The door slowly opened and Jack walked in. He told Alice, "Your parents once helped me. From now on, you can call me Uncle. I'll take you home." He reached out his hand to her, and she hesitantly placed her small hand in his. He helped her up. She was still scared and uncertain, but he gave her a gentle smile and led her away. 11 years later, Alice had grown up. Jack celebrated her birthday with her and put a necklace around her neck, a gift he had prepared for her. Alice happily thanked him, and he gently patted her head. They drank together, played around, and had a wonderful evening. However, Alice had a low alcohol tolerance and soon became very drunk. Suddenly, she kissed Jack on the cheek, leaving him stunned. She whispered, "I'll tell you a secret, I like you." Jack's expression turned serious as he reminded her that he was her uncle. But she argued, "We aren't related by blood." He thought she was just drunk and talking nonsense, but she wrapped her arms around his neck, stood on tiptoe, and leaned in to kiss him. Just as their lips were about to touch, she suddenly passed out. Jack looked at her and thought, "I'm 10 years older than you. You can't like me." 3 years later, 2 months before Alice's birthday, she prepared a surprise for Jack in advance. The moment she heard the door open, she knew Jack had returned, so she excitedly ran downstairs. But what she saw shocked her. Jack was passionately kissing another woman on the sofa. Stunned, she dropped the box in her hands. Jack looked up and saw her. "This is my girlfriend, Olivia," he said, wrapping an arm around Olivia's shoulder. Alice's heart shattered. She turned around and left. The image of them kissing replayed in her mind, and she burst into tears. That night, her Aunt Mary, who lived in Paris, called and invited Alice to move there. Alice agreed, but said she needed 2 more months to handle things before leaving. She circled her birthday on the calendar. This would be the last birthday Jack ever spent with her. The next morning, Jack saw Alice leaving early and wanted to drive her. But Olivia suddenly clung to his arm and said to Alice, "Jack and I are going on vacation to Hawaii today. We're heading to the airport now." Alice refused their offer and turned to leave in a hurry, almost tripping in the process. Luckily, Jack rushed over and caught her. Worried, he asked if she was hurt. Olivia's expression was complicated, but she still invited Alice to join them in the car. Alice agreed, but shook off Jack's hand, leaving him a little confused. During the car ride, Olivia asked Jack to help her apply lipstick. Watching him do so, Alice was reminded of the time when Jack had applied lipstick for her. She had complained that he did a terrible job. He kept trying anyway, while she swung her legs playfully. He had lifted her up and told her, "You look beautiful no matter what." Jack used to pick her up from school every day. She would run to him, throwing herself into his arms before demanding that he carry her home on his back. They had laughed so much back then, but now he was putting lipstick on another woman. His tenderness no longer belonged to her alone. After Alice got out of the car, Jack handed her an umbrella, but she silently turned and left. Watching her back, he realized she had been speaking less these past 2 days. A few days later, Jack and Olivia returned from Hawaii. Olivia suggested that Alice attend an elite social banquet, saying it would be a great opportunity for her to introduce Alice to a potential boyfriend. She told Alice, "Since I'll be marrying your uncle in the future, it would be so lonely if you were still by yourself then." Her words pierced Alice's heart, but she still agreed to go. At the banquet, the guests all saw Jack and Olivia as a perfect match. They also knew about Alice's longtime crush on Jack and how she had confessed to him multiple times. They looked down on her, believing she was just an orphan who wasn't worthy of Jack. Alice felt hurt. Jack wanted to step in and help her, but before he could, Alan walked up to her first. Alan asked for Alice's contact information, making Jack feel uneasy. However, Olivia clung to his arm and reminded him to greet the other guests. As Alice watched Jack turn away, she added Alan on WeChat, but told him, "It's a bit stuffy in here. I'm going outside for some fresh air." Jack also noticed her mood and followed her out to check on her. Thinking she was chatting with Alan, he felt jealous. He handed her a piece of cake, and she took it while explaining, "I was just texting my aunt." Only then did he relax. When Olivia saw Jack returning with Alice, jealousy flashed in her eyes. She deliberately knocked over the champagne and shoved Alice. Jack instinctively wanted to help Alice, but Olivia grabbed his arm, showing him her injured hand. Meanwhile, Alice's arm was seriously wounded, covered in blood. Olivia told Jack, "Let Alan take her to the hospital." Alice lifted her gaze to Jack, silently hoping he would insist on taking her himself. But he remained motionless. With no other choice, she left with Alan. At the hospital, Alan stayed by her side through the examination and helped her walk out of the consultation room. Alice thanked him but made it clear that she wasn't interested in him romantically. Alan was surprised. He had never expected his charm to fail. That night, Jack drank alone at Olivia's house. She traced her fingers over his body, inviting him to stay the night. But he refused, grabbing his suit jacket from the chair and leaving. Olivia was furious. She had already seen through his feelings for Alice. Jack returned home and went straight into Alice's bedroom. He climbed onto her bed and tightly embraced her. She woke up in shock, finding him in her bed. Suddenly, he kissed her forcefully. She struggled, but he didn't stop, pressing kisses along her neck and shoulders. She pushed him away and reminded him, "Uncle, you're drunk." "I'm Alice." Breathing heavily, he leaned in again and kissed her lips with even more passion. This time, she didn't resist. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck. The next morning, Alice sat in a daze, staring at her blood-stained nightgown. When Jack woke up and realized he was in Alice's bed, he immediately questioned her, asking why he was there and warning her not to get any ideas about him. Faced with his harsh attitude, Alice lied. She told him, "Nothing happened last night. You were too heavy for me to move, so I just let you sleep in my bed." To pay off the money Jack had spent on her over the years, Alice decided to sell all her expensive handbags to raise the funds. She told her friend Lily that she would be holding an art exhibition in 10 days, and her friend was very happy for her. While preparing the paintings for the exhibition, Alice suddenly saw her favorite painting, the one of Jack and her. 3 years ago, she had walked into Jack's study, intending to tell him that she had ranked first in the entire grade. However, she found him asleep, so she quietly kissed his face through the test paper. Thinking of that moment, Alice's heart shattered, and she broke into tears once again. 10 days later, Alice held the exhibition as planned. Olivia was also artist. She told Alice, "This gallery was specially prepared for me by Jack because he really likes my art." Alice felt a pang of disappointment. The people soon noticed that one of Alice's paintings bore a striking resemblance to Olivia's and began debating who had plagiarized whom. Journalists surrounded Alice, asking her if she had copied Olivia's work. One of them presented evidence. The painting in question was the one Alice had painted of herself kissing Jack. Olivia said to the reporters, "I hope you won't cover this too much. Alice is still young and made a mistake. This painting was made when I kissed Jack." The people grew angry and began throwing paper balls at Alice. She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face, because she knew no one would believe that the painting was hers. Just then, Jack entered the gallery holding the sketch of Alice's painting. She ran to him, tugging at his sleeve, looking at him with tear-filled eyes. However, he handed the sketch to Olivia. Alice asked him why, and he replied, "This painting should never have been here, and it certainly shouldn't be associated with you." Alice collapsed. If she were labeled as a plagiarist, her career would be ruined. She couldn't bear it and ran out of the gallery. 3 days before Alice left the country, she managed to gather enough money to repay Jack. She was serving at a restaurant when she unexpectedly ran into Jack and Olivia, who were dining together. Jack gave Olivia a bouquet of roses and asked Alice, "Waitress, can you record a video for us with my phone?" Alice walked over, took his phone, and started recording. Then Jack kissed Olivia in front of everyone. Alice suddenly felt nauseous and ran to the bathroom. But in reality, Jack hadn't kissed Olivia on the lips. He had only been deceiving Alice to make her give up on him. Alice went to the hospital for a checkup and found out she was pregnant. She realized that she had conceived Jack's child that night. The day before her departure, which also happened to be her birthday, Alice planned to tell Jack about her pregnancy, but he received a call from Olivia and hurriedly left the house. Alice waited for him all night, but he never returned. So she called him. However, it was Olivia who answered, saying that Jack was taking a shower. Alice was completely disappointed and hung up. She lit the candles and made a wish alone. She packed her things, placed the money she had saved on the table, and turned to leave. From that moment on, she no longer owed him anything. When Jack returned home, he saw a card on the table. It was Alice's farewell letter. She wrote, "I'm going to Paris. "Uncle, I've finally given up on loving you. I wish you happiness." He panicked and called her several times, but the calls wouldn't go through. He rushed to the airport. However, the flight to Paris had already taken off. He felt guilty and began crying, but suddenly he heard Alice's voice behind him. He turned around and saw her standing there. He ran to her and hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. She was a little confused, but he still didn't let go. It turned out that Alice, feeling weak and pregnant, almost fainted before boarding the plane, so the flight attendant suggested she cancel her trip. He took her hand and said, "Go home with me." After returning home, Alice remembered when Jack had taken her to his house as a child and brought her into this large room. This bedroom had originally been Jack's, but he had told Alice, "This is the best room in the villa. You're the little princess, so you deserve to stay in the best room." Now that Jack was about to get married, Alice felt she no longer deserved to stay in this bedroom and moved to the guest room. Because of her unstable pregnancy, Alice was temporarily unable to go to Paris. She had planned to tell Jack about her pregnancy, but Olivia happened to walk by and interrupted her. Olivia deliberately showed her wedding photo and told Alice, "Jack and I are getting married next month." So Alice no longer wanted to tell Jack about her pregnancy. She made an excuse and left. Walking down the street, she thought about the one-night stand with Jack and decided to keep the baby and raise it herself. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach and squatted down. By chance, Alan walked by and saw her. He helped her up. She gathered her courage and asked him, "Would you marry me?" He was stunned. She added, "I heard your family is urging you to get married. We can be a fake couple. I'm pregnant, and I need to get married so my child can have a household registration." She thought Alan would reject her proposal, but instead, he said, "I'm willing to marry you. It's better than agreeing to marry someone my father arranges. You're much more interesting." When Jack found out that Alice was about to marry Alan, he froze. Olivia warned him that he shouldn't fall in love with Alice. He said to her, "What we have is just an act. I told you from the beginning that our marriage was only a contract." The next day, Jack accidentally found Alice's pregnancy checkup report in her bag. He thought it was Alan who had gotten Alice pregnant and planned to confront Alan. But Alice stopped him and said, "The child isn't Alan's. One night, I got drunk and slept with another man, and I don't even know who he is." Jack was furious and scolded her. "How could you get pregnant with a bastard child?" Alice froze and told him she didn't need him to interfere with her life. He tore up her pregnancy report and said, "From now on, your affairs have nothing to do with me." She crouched down, staring at the torn checkup report, crying uncontrollably. A few days later, Alice's friend Lily took her to an artist gathering where Jack and Olivia happened to be present. Alice lost a game and had to face a punishment. She was asked to kiss a man at the event. She didn't want to, but they pushed her into the arms of a senior. Jack couldn't hold back anymore. He walked up to Alice and said, "Come home with me." Ignoring Olivia's objections, he took Alice and left. Back at home, Jack scolded Alice for being frivolous and said she shouldn't kiss a stranger. She retorted, "Since I lost the game, I had to accept the punishment." Jack said, "So, does that mean you could kiss me too?" She suddenly hugged him, stood on tiptoe, and kissed him. Jack was stunned, his eyes wide open, because he didn't expect Alice to really kiss him. But Alice deepened the kiss, kissing him harder. Afterward, Alice told him, "Yes, I can kiss anyone." Jack pushed her away and cursed, saying her kiss was cheap. He locked her in the bedroom to reflect, then lit a cigarette. He broke down in tears, deeply blaming himself for not protecting Alice. He held his forehead and cried sorrowfully. Alan's mother opposed him marrying Alice and slapped her hard across the face. She demanded that her son cancel the engagement immediately, or else she would kick him out of the house. Alan apologized to Alice, but didn't dare defy his mother. After witnessing this, Jack turned and left. Alice thought he was angry again, but soon after, he returned and took her hand, saying, "Let's go get our marriage certificate." After they got the certificate, Jack told Alice, "You need to keep our marriage a secret for now. Don't let anyone know." She agreed. Olivia invited Jack, Alice, and Alan to her party. There, she deliberately got Alan drunk. Alan went to Alice's bedroom and pushed her onto the bed. It was Olivia who encouraged him to sleep with Alice, thinking it would force his mother to accept their marriage. He believed her, kissed Alice, but at that moment, Jack burst in and punched him. Alan snapped out of his drunken state and apologized to Alice, but Jack ordered him to leave. Jack took off his suit jacket and draped it over Alice. She looked up at him, remembering the moment when he had reached out to her as a child. She hugged him tightly, and he embraced her back, saying, "I will never let anyone bully you again." She nodded silently in his arms. The next morning, Jack walked out of Alice's bedroom. Olivia was very angry when she learned that he had been taking care of Alice all night. Jack suspected that Olivia had led Alan to Alice's room, but she denied it. Jack warned her, "I told you, we have a contractual marriage. I can give you a title, give you everything, but you cannot hurt my family." Olivia's friend told her that Alice was pregnant. Olivia recalled their reactions and began to suspect that Alice was carrying Jack's child. When Olivia got home, she asked the maid if Alice had shown any signs of abnormality the previous month. The maid remembered that one day, Alice's sheets were suddenly stained with blood, and the night before, Jack had been drunk. Olivia confirmed her suspicions. The next day, Olivia tried to introduce a divorced older man to Alice as a potential marriage candidate, but Jack refused, and they had a fierce argument. Olivia hugged his waist and said, "You and Alice living together isn't suitable. Let's move to a newlywed house." He agreed, but Alice was very upset. She told Jack, "You don't need to move out. I've already started looking for a place. I'll move out instead." He refused, placed a bank card in her hand, and said, "Buy whatever you want. This will always be your home." But she believed that wherever he was, that was home. A few days later, Olivia deliberately invited Alice to try on wedding dresses. She asked Alice, "What are you going to do about the child in your belly?" Alice wanted to keep it, but Olivia grabbed her hand and asked, "Are you really planning to have Jack's child?" Alice was stunned. Olivia asked her to leave the city and stay away from Jack, or else she would expose the secret. Alice said, "If you do that, it will hurt him." Olivia slapped her hard. Later, Jack returned home drunk. He angrily scolded Alice because Olivia had told him that Alice had acted flirtatiously with many men that night, which was why she didn't know who the father of the child was. Her words provoked Jack. He pinned Alice down on the sofa, accusing her of not valuing herself. She cried as he said to her, "If you're really that loose, does that mean I can have you too?" He kissed her passionately for a long time, and though Alice struggled, her strength was too weak. His hands roamed her body, and she tried to push him away, saying, "You're drunk." Jack felt the scene was familiar, and he finally remembered passionately kissing Alice in bed. He asked her, "Is the child you're carrying mine?" She panicked and pushed him aside, saying, "You're overthinking. The child isn't yours." Jack suddenly felt a piercing headache and collapsed in her arms. She touched his face, realizing that if the public knew the child she was carrying was Jack's, he would become the target of public criticism. She didn't want him to be hurt. She cried bitterly and secretly kissed him. The next day, Lily introduced Alice to a job at an art exhibition, and her boss was Bruce, the senior from the last gathering. Alice's first art exhibition planning was a success, and she received praise from Bruce. Jack saw her introducing the artworks to the visitors, and a smile of admiration appeared on his face. Olivia, seeing his expression, became very jealous and planned to teach Alice a lesson. After work, Alice was ambushed by two thugs holding iron rods. One of them kicked her hard in the stomach. She cried and begged them to spare the child in her belly, but they still beat her viciously. Jack arrived just in time, chased the thugs away, and helped Alice up from the ground. She was badly injured and lost consciousness in his arms. She was rushed to the hospital, and due to timely treatment, the child in her belly was saved. Jack held her hand, feeling guilty for not protecting her properly. He remembered the lively Alice from before and swore to protect her well in the future. To focus on taking care of her, he decided to postpone his wedding with Olivia, which made her very angry. After Alice recovered, she moved into another one of Jack's villas. She told him, "I will stay here. After I have the baby, we'll get a divorce." Suddenly, Olivia called and told Jack she was pregnant, hoping he would come to be with her. Alice was stunned. Jack left, leaving her alone to eat. When Jack arrived at Olivia's house, he confronted her, saying, "I've never had sex with you. Why are you pregnant?" Olivia explained that during a drunken night in Hawaii, they had been together. She hoped to move into the villa Alice was staying at so they could both raise the baby together. Though Alice pretended not to care, She warned Olivia, "If you dare hurt my child again, I will never forgive you." Alice attended Lily's birthday party, and Senior Bruce was also there. Lily got drunk and asked Bruce to take Alice home. Bruce took off his jacket and draping it over Alice. But suddenly, Jack appeared, grabbed her hand, and told Bruce, "I'll take her home." After Bruce left, Alice asked Jack when he would marry Olivia. He answered, "Next week." Alice replied, "Then let's divorce tomorrow." Jack was stunned, mistakenly thinking she wanted to marry someone else, and scolded her for being degenerate. She was even more hurt and said, "You're getting married soon, so don't get involved in my life." As she turned to leave, he grabbed Bruce's jacket she was wearing, took off his own, and draped it over her. She intended to refuse, but he quickly put it on her. Both of them cried silently, but neither could speak the words in their hearts. The next day, Jack did not show up for their divorce appointment and intentionally ignored her calls. His assistant informed him that they had captured the thugs who had beaten Alice. The thugs confessed that Olivia had instructed them. Jack returned home, grabbed Olivia by the neck, and decided to cancel the wedding. She hugged him from behind, pleading with him not to do this. She mentioned the child in her belly, and Jack softened. He forgave Olivia and asked her to apologize to Alice. The next day, Olivia apologized to Alice, but Alice refused. She asked Jack, "Did you forgive her for me?" He remained silent, and Alice was deeply disappointed in him. One day, Alice ran into her college classmate Tom by chance. For years ago, he had pursued her passionately. At that time, when Jack saw Alice accepting Tom's roses, he threw the flowers to the ground. Tom told Alice, "I heard that Alan has called off the engagement. I can marry you." For years ago, to provoke Jack, Alice had agreed to date Tom. But later, Tom suddenly disappeared without a word. He told Alice that Jack had threatened him and forced him to leave. She said she was pregnant, but he held her hand and still expressed his willingness to marry her. A few days later, Alice visited Tom's newly opened studio and discovered that he had named the studio after both of their names. She agreed to marry him, and he was overjoyed. Olivia deliberately brought Jack to the entrance of Tom's studio, hoping that Jack would catch Alice and Tom acting intimately. Jack rushed into the studio, grabbed Alice's hand, and told her to go home with him. But Tom held onto her other hand and told Jack, "Alice and I are getting married." Jack disagreed with her marrying Tom because he believed Tom was not a good person. However, Alice thought Tom was a suitable marriage partner and scolded Jack for causing a scene at Tom's studio. Jack was stunned, took a few steps back, and turned to leave. Tom told Alice that there was a problem with the studio's cash flow, and he urgently needed $800,000, so he asked her for a loan. To gain her trust, he gave her the property title and the keys to a new house. Alice agreed to lend him the money. A few days later, Alice and Tom held their wedding, but Tom didn't show up. She called him, but he didn't answer. She went to his studio, where someone told her that the things in the studio were all rented. Alice recalled their reunion and realized that she had been deceived. Later, the real estate agent informed her that the property deed Tom had given her was forged. Tom confessed that he had only married her for her money. Alice broke down in despair, crouching down and crying. Jack walked up to her, gently wiped away her tears, and said, "Come home with me." She extended her hand to him, and he took off his jacket, draped it over her, then squatted down and carried her. He told her that he had investigated Tom 4 years ago and found out he was a gambler, which was why he had driven him away. Olivia, seeing this, was furious. She and Tom had been in cahoots for a long time. The next day, Olivia deliberately fell to the ground, falsely accusing Alice of pushing her. When Jack saw the blood on the floor, he quickly picked her up and rushed her to the hospital. The doctor informed him that Olivia had miscarried. When Olivia woke up, she broke down and cried in Jack's arms. She showed him a video of Alice and Tom and told Jack that the child Alice was carrying was Tom's. She said to Jack, "Alice is afraid her secret will be exposed, so she deliberately pushed me today. You can't cover for her, it's illegal." When Jack returned home, he slapped Alice. She confessed to him, "The child I'm carrying is yours. That's why Olivia wanted to frame me." But Jack shoved her hand away, not believing her words, and told her to move out. Heartbroken, she decided to leave him. Soon after, Jack and Olivia got married. Tom, having blown all his money on gambling, soon ran out of funds. He accidentally found out that Olivia was getting married that day, so he snuck into the wedding venue and threatened her for another $800,000. She gave him the money, telling him never to show up again. However, Jack saw her and Tom talking secretly. Suspicious, he ordered his assistant to investigate them. Tom lost all his money again. Alice found him and said, "I'm willing to give you double the money. Just do something for me." She asked him to publicly expose Olivia's wrongdoings at the ceremony the next day, and Tom agreed. The next day, Alice arrived at the agreed location, but she was kidnapped. When she woke up, she saw Olivia pouring gasoline around her. Olivia told her, "I gave Tom more money, so he betrayed you." She pulled out a lighter, intending to burn Alice alive. Jack found out that Olivia and Tom had been working together all along, and now Alice was missing. After an investigation, he arrived at the abandoned parking lot where Alice was held. Olivia told him she had killed Alice. He shoved her to the ground without hesitation and rushed into the parking lot. He found Alice in the blaze, but she quickly passed out in his arms. He carried her out of the fire. When she woke up, she learned that she had miscarried due to inhaling a large amount of smoke. He asked Alice if the child was his, but she replied no. She broke down emotionally and told him to leave the hospital room. For the next week, Jack didn't go to work and stayed by Alice's side in the hospital. He sent people to break both of Tom's legs and sent him to a remote area for punishment. When Alice was discharged, Olivia appeared in front of him. After being pushed to the ground by Jack, Olivia completely gave up and told him, "I wasn't actually pregnant. We never had sex. That miscarriage was also something I conspired with the doctor to fake." Jack ordered his assistant to send Olivia to the police station. She yelled, "You selfish man ruined 2 women's lives. You don't deserve to be loved." Alice told Jack, although Olivia is malicious, she didn't actually want to kill me that day. She had intended to burn Alice alive, but she stopped and threw away the lighter. Alice told Jack, "You have protected me all these years, but you've also hurt me the most." After she left, Jack cried. He knelt at the hospital door, filled with self-blame and guilt. Alice planned to go to Paris for further studies. Alan gave her a bouquet of flowers, hoping to get back together, but she decisively rejected him. After seeing this, Jack walked over, threw away the flowers, grabbed her hand, and said, "Let's get married. I won't allow you to marry someone else." She shook off his hand, and he grabbed her again, holding her face, preparing to kiss her. But she turned her head away. She told him she was going to Paris soon. He froze, thinking he didn't have the right to keep her by his side. She smiled and said, "Goodbye, uncle." He clenched his fist, crying sorrowfully. He couldn't accept her love, so all he could do was wish her a bright future. He ordered his assistant to release all the evidence of Olivia plagiarizing Alice's artwork. He wanted to clear Alice's name. A few days later, Lily told Jack that Alice's child had been his. He was stunned. Although Alice had asked Lily not to tell him, Lily couldn't bear to see Alice suffer. She gave Jack a photo album, a record of Alice's pregnancy. He opened the album and saw the pregnancy test report that had been torn apart before. Her baby was slowly developing, and she was looking forward to the child's birth. But during her pregnancy, she had been bullied and humiliated repeatedly. Jack flipped through the album, closed his eyes, and cried uncontrollably. He sent Alice a text message saying he had something to talk to her about and asked her to wait for him at the airport. When he was about to head to the airport, Olivia drove into him with her car. Alice called him, and at that moment, he was lying on the ground. He told his assistant not to tell Alice about the accident, as he didn't want her to worry. Unable to reach him by phone, Alice boarded the plane to Paris, ready to start a new life. Due to the car accident, Jack became disabled, and he felt unworthy of Alice. So he never contacted her again. 3 years later, he went to a flower shop and found that the owner was Alice. She smiled and said, "Long time no see." He nodded. They both cried as they looked at each other. Do you think they have a chance to get back together? Please share your opinions in the comments.